Hendon Hooker right now, I don't think you can disagree with me on this, is probably going to win the Heisman if he continues this pace. He is putting up gaudy statistics, and at the same time, he is winning very big, important games for the Tennessee Volunteers. We talked about him as a prospect, and we talked about how the traits all live up to what he's capable of doing, and he's bringing it all onto the field. Last season, he was showing signs of it. Now he's really putting it together at a very high level. So what I want to talk about here, man, is do we think Hendon can fit in the first round, even though he's 24 years old, even though he's been around for a long time? How does he project, and could he possibly be a first-round quarterback?
I have a lot of thoughts about Hendon Hooker, Joe. I'm going to start you off with the question.
Yes.
Why is everyone so infatuated with Will Levis, but no one talks about Hendon Hooker that much in the draft side of things? Explain it to me. Because Will Levis is going to be 24 in draft night. Yeah. Hendon Hooker is going to be 25. Everyone talks about Hendon Hooker's age like he's the oldest guy in the world. Will Levis is almost as old as Hendon Hooker. It's not like that much of a difference. And I would argue tremendously, that Hendon Hooker is much further along than Will Levis from a mechanical perspective, from a mechanics perspective. Mm-hmm. And I would also argue that Hendon Hooker, his arm might not be quite as live as Will Levis, but like Hendon Hooker's got tools, man. Like he can run, big kid, strong arm. He's been really productive. And the best thing is that he's thrown 4 interceptions in the last 2 years at Tennessee, man. Like he takes care of the football as well. So to answer your question, can he be a first-round player? Yeah, I think he can. Even with the age, I think he can. And I would love to hear your input on this because this is what I think. I think that there is a legitimate chance. Look, the NFL loves Will Levis, so he might still end up being, one of the top 3 quarterbacks off the board. But why shouldn't Hendon Hooker be in that conversation when it all said and done? Why shouldn't he be? Why shouldn't he be?
I think we always have this willingness, pundits in general have this willingness to commit to guys. And then the same thing happens with the polls too. Like the same thing in the Heisman voting, the same shit always happens where there is a commitment to guys that we decide and teams that we decide are going to be great before the season even starts. The season then plays out, and then it takes way too long for us to adjust our opinions. And we see it again. We see it with the polls where there's teams like Purdue that aren't ranked and they've got better resumes than some of these other ranked teams that have more losses. And in this circumstance, coming into the season, everyone was just like Will Levis, Will Levis, Will Levis. Everyone was in awe of the plays that he made last year. And right now, Will Levis hasn't taken that step forward. He has stayed stagnant. He has been mistake prone. He's been unhealthy. He's been dealing with some injuries. But I don't think Will Levis has shown anything comparable to being a first-round quarterback. On the other hand, who we did this comparison show a while ago, we compared these two guys and did a breakdown of how these guys look and how they might fit in the class. Hendon Hooker has a lot of similar positives in his game. Great athlete, can throw on the run. His deep accuracy has been fantastic. And he's actually taken that step forward. I think that there's just naturally a lag when it comes to trying to make these evaluations. And those that don't actually watch the film, those that don't properly evaluate it, are going to rest on those preseason assumptions until they go back and look at it, or they're basing their thoughts on somebody else's opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say this, man, even though I agree that Hendon has taken a huge step from last year to this year, even though I thought he was really good last year. Like he did some really good stuff. That's why we liked him in the summer a little bit. He would have been the best quarterback in last year's class. So maybe looking back on him, maybe he should have declared, but like that's another conversation for a different day. Regardless, that's my disconnect, Joe. That's my disconnect right now, is that I do think that there's just some people that just have not given him a fair shake on like the new film, because again, I'm not talking about a kid that is like, because I think that this is what people's misconception is. They're like, Will Levis is the super traitsy upside kid. And when I bring in a Hendon Hooker into the conversation, I think a lot of people assume that I'm talking about a higher floor kid. And while he has a higher floor, the things that draw me to Hendon Hooker is that not only does he have a higher floor than Will Levis, but he's also very talented in his own right? Like this isn't just like a finished product and he's not getting a ton better. Like this is a talented kid, man. Like if you go look at his profile, I mean, he was a 4-star kid, quarterback coming out originally at Virginia Tech. He was a 1,000-point basketball scorer in high school. Like he was a really talented athlete that came out. And I'll say this, Joe, I hope that that Hendon Hooker does end up being that type of guy. Because you know which of your favorite NFL draft analysts had a tweet of a throw of his in 2019.
Was it Mel
Do you know
Kiper?
who that was? Yes, it was Mel Kiper. No, it wasn't Mel Kiper. It was people that actually do the work. But that's a different conversation.
I also think one of the things just that factors into this too is, and maybe this is overanalyzation, but maybe it's like the case of that. I know that they both transferred, but maybe it's also the case of that, like Hendon Hooker didn't win the job right away and he had less playing time, and it's just like stupid insight by people they hold that against him. Like,
but Will Levis
part of it.
Will Levis didn't play at all, barely. I mean, he couldn't beat out Sean Clifford. I mean, so like he's in like
my
the
point
similar.
Is he transferred to Kentucky and then he took over, and compared to Hendon, who transferred to Tennessee and then they started Joe Milton for some reason.
Got it. I thought you were talking about like. I always talk about this, Joe. Can we still talk about how absurd it is that Virginia Tech and Justin Fuentes started both Quincy Patterson and Braxton Burmeister over Hendon Hooker? Yeah. Can we talk about that, man? What a joke.
Well, there's a reason why he doesn't currently have a job, but the more important thing is that Josh Heupel took him 2 tries to figure it out. But again, look, the main takeaway from this is that I think the conversation needs to be started, and this is not a overcalculation. One of the guys we're going to talk about here, an overreaction is definitely going to be the case. It's going to be a recency bias on my part, and we're going to get to that in a second. But for Hendon Hooker, this is not recency bias. He had tape to back it up last year. He was building momentum, and then that momentum heavily carried into this season. He has corrected, not fully corrected, but he has progressed the issues that we saw last year. But the consistency, the protecting the football, I know that he plays in an offense that is going to buoy him a little bit and help him out in some circumstances where he's not going to be taking maybe a lot of dangerous shots. But the big thing for me, Ryan, that is exciting, despite him not having a huge arm, and I mentioned it a second ago, is the deep ball accuracy. Like, it was fully on display with the connections that he made with Jalen Hyatt in this game against Alabama, that he was easily able to make those throws. That deep accuracy, I think, might be one of his best traits.
What's
aside from, I don't know, I'm running on fumes here. I woke up at 5. Best traits aside from his ability to throw on the run and extend plays with his legs.
Yeah. Joe, quick stat before I go into Hendon.
Yeah.
All right. Braxton Burmeister is the starting quarterback for San Diego State. In 5 games, he has thrown for 263 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions.
Wait, what school is he at? I got distracted.
San Diego State. Joe, as a team, San Diego State is averaging 108 yards passing a game and completing 48.9% of their passes as a team.
Everyone acted like San Diego State was good last year. They're the fake.
They were decent. They were decent last year. This year they're bad.
Well, they actually had a good record, and everyone was saying that they were a lot better than they were, and they were going to ride all this momentum into this year, and then they got stomped out by Arizona, which was a joke.
But to your point, the most impressive thing about what Hendon Hooker has done the last few games, especially, is that he hasn't had Cedric Tillman. Like his best receiver, a wide receiver that could potentially go in the second round. Like, he's that type of good receiver. Hyatt's a good player in his own right, but like, he's done all this without his number 1 guy going into the year. Was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. Cedric Tillman is going to be at the Senior Bowl, guaranteed. Could be a top 50 pick when all is said and done if the injuries check out and he tests well. And Hendon Hooker has maintained his incredible play that he's had. And you're correct, Joe. I think you saw it. I think it was the second game of last season, right? When Milton was the starter, Milton couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with these deep balls. Like, he overthrew about 4 to 5 deep balls in that game. And you're just like, what the heck?
And he has the bigger arm.
He does have the stronger arm. You're right. But Hendon Hooker comes in and he's just beautiful, man. Like, one of the best deep ball thrower, maybe the best deep ball thrower in this class. Like, he has Bryce Young, I think, has some really nice touch as well, working deep. But like, Hendon, man, he just has a feel, and like, I want him to just go to a team that just runs a lot of like vertical stretch stuff, because I really think he could push the ball down the field a ton, man. He is a talented kid with the deep ball.
Off the top of my head, I mean, maybe if the Packers are looking for a little redirection there, maybe
Packers are interesting.